The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which escalated into a full-scale war following Russia's invasion in February 2022, continues to shape geopolitical dynamics and humanitarian crises across Europe. Recent developments have brought renewed attention to the strategies employed by Russian President Vladimir Putin, particularly in light of his recent declaration of a temporary truce over the Easter holiday. However, this ceasefire was marred by numerous violations and the conflict persists with alarming intensity. Initially, Putin's aim when he mobilized troops into Ukraine was to swiftly capture Kyiv and dismantle the pro-Western government of President Volodymyr Zelensky. The Russian leader sought to reassert Ukraine's alignment with Moscow and has long viewed the nation as part of Russia's sphere of influence. Despite failing to achieve a quick victory, Russia now controls approximately a fifth of Ukrainian territory, underscoring the protracted nature of this conflict. The truce, which Putin announced was motivated by humanitarian concerns, lasted for only 30 hours from April 19 to April 21, 2025, but reports indicate it was violated nearly 3,000 times by Russian forces, according to Zelensky. In a statement, the Ukrainian president emphasized that the military would mirror Russian actions. The Ukrainian army is acting and will continue to act in an absolutely mirror image of Russia. The Ukrainian military remains in a defensive posture, preparing for continued assaults. Despite the backdrop of violence, the recent truce was seen by some as a potential opportunity for diplomacy. U.S. President Donald Trump has suggested that both Russia and Ukraine could reach an agreement soon, indicating a willingness to engage in negotiations. However, skepticism abounds regarding Russia's intentions. Many Ukrainians doubt the sincerity of Putin's ceasefire offer, with citizens expressing a lack of trust in the Kremlin's commitment to peace. They've already broken their promise, said one Kyiv resident, highlighting the deep-seated distrust that complicates any potential resolution. In addition to the military and diplomatic tensions, the humanitarian impact of the war continues to escalate. Reports indicate that the conflict has resulted in significant civilian casualties, with both parties trading accusations of targeting non-combatants and critical infrastructure. The toll of this war extends beyond the battlefield, as millions of Ukrainians have been displaced, with many seeking refuge abroad due to ongoing hostilities. Zelensky has proposed a longer halt on long-range strikes against civilian areas for at least 30 days, a move aimed at promoting peace and reducing civilian suffering. However, with Russia's recent violations of the Easter truce and ongoing military operations, the likelihood of such an agreement being honored remains low. The complexity of the situation is exacerbated by historical grievances and narratives surrounding national identity. Putin has often framed the conflict in terms of denazification and demilitarization, claims that have been widely discredited but serve to justify his aggressive stance. Zelensky, who is of Jewish descent, has countered these narratives by emphasizing Ukraine's distinct cultural identity and sovereignty, which have persisted independently of Russia for centuries. As the war drags on, the economic impacts on both nations are becoming increasingly pronounced. Ukraine faces crippling economic challenges, including extensive infrastructure damage and loss of industrial capacity, while Russia grapples with international sanctions that have strained its economy. The prolonged nature of the conflict has also led to a war of attrition, with both sides engaged in a grueling struggle for territory and resources. Looking ahead, the international community will be closely monitoring developments in the region. The potential for renewed peace talks remains, but is contingent upon both sides demonstrating a commitment to ceasefire agreements and genuine dialogue. The path to resolution is fraught with challenges, but the hope for peace endures amid the ongoing turmoil. As the situation evolves, the global implications of this conflict will continue to resonate, shaping the future of European security and international relations. In a stark reminder of the ongoing conflict, the latest assessments of the Russian offensive in Ukraine reveal a troubling pattern of violations surrounding the recently declared Easter truce. According to reports from the Institute for the Study of War (ISW) and statements from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Russian forces have engaged in numerous attacks even during the supposed ceasefire. The truce, which was unilaterally proposed by President Vladimir Putin, lasted from April 19 to April 20. Yet both sides quickly accused each other of breaching the agreement. Zelensky reported on April 20 that Russian forces launched ground attacks and drone strikes in several regions including Siversk-Toretsk and Zaporizhia despite the commitment to a temporary halt in hostilities. Effective ceasefire agreements must provide monitoring mechanisms of potential violations, he emphasized, underscoring the necessity of transparency and adherence to any ceasefire terms. The Ukrainian General Staff corroborated these claims, noting a significant increase in Russian assaults, particularly in the Pokrovsk sector. The Russian Ministry of Defense, however, countered that their forces had strictly adhered to the ceasefire, claiming that Ukrainian troops were the ones violating the truce by conducting strikes against Russian positions. This back-and-forth highlights the challenges of establishing trust in negotiations, particularly with both sides entrenched in their narratives. Compounding the conflict's complexities. Zelensky proposed a 30-day moratorium on long-range strikes targeting civilian infrastructure, a move aimed at reducing harm to non-combatants. His suggestion is indicative of Ukraine's ongoing efforts to navigate the treacherous terrain of diplomacy while ensuring the safety of its citizens amid the turmoil. Yet the Kremlin has dismissed such overtures, suggesting that they may continue to use vague ceasefire agreements to deflect responsibility for ongoing hostilities. In addition to military maneuvers, reports of human rights abuses continue to emerge from the front lines. Zelensky condemned the systematic persecution of religious communities in occupied territories, citing that 67 Ukrainian religious leaders have been killed or tortured since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. The deliberate targeting of places of worship and the arbitrary detention of clergy are stark reminders of the war's impact beyond the battlefield. Analysts suggest that the Kremlin's repeated invocation of historical narratives, particularly around the Russian victory in World War II, is part of a broader strategy to militarize society and bolster public support for the ongoing conflict. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's claims of combating neo-Nazi ideology in Ukraine resonate with this narrative, aiming to justify Russia's military actions and galvanize domestic support. As the situation unfolds, the implications of these developments are profound. The continued violation of ceasefire agreements and the rhetoric surrounding military actions suggest that both sides remain entrenched in a cycle of violence. The potential for a prolonged conflict looms large, with the Kremlin seemingly preparing for a protracted engagement not only with Ukraine but potentially with NATO as well. Looking ahead, the international community remains watchful for any signs of meaningful dialogue or shifts in strategy. The complexities of the conflict are heightened by the interplay of military objectives, human rights considerations, and geopolitical maneuvering. As both sides prepare for what is expected to be a tumultuous period ahead, the focus will inevitably shift to how they navigate the delicate balance between warfare and diplomacy. The Easter truce may have been short-lived, but the call for peace and the need for robust monitoring mechanisms in future agreements remains more crucial than ever. In a poignant reminder of the complexities of international relations, Russian President Vladimir Putin recently expressed condolences following the death of Pope Francis, acknowledging the pontiff's impact on global peace efforts. This gesture comes amidst a backdrop of heightened tensions due to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, which has strained the relationship between the Kremlin and the Vatican. Pope Francis, known for his advocacy of peace and dialogue, had openly criticized the war, a stance that has often put him at odds with Russia's aggressive military strategy. Putin's remarks, made public on April 21, 2025, illustrate a delicate balancing act. While he praised the late Pope's commitment to humanitarian causes, the Kremlin has simultaneously employed tactics to delay meaningful peace talks in Ukraine. The Russian leader's recent attempts at diplomacy, including a surprise announcement of a 32-hour ceasefire over the Easter weekend, were seen more as strategic posturing than genuine efforts towards resolution. Following a week of intense missile strikes, including a brutal attack on Kharkiv, the ceasefire was violated nearly 3,000 times by Russian forces, casting doubt on Moscow's commitment to peace. The ongoing war has led to a significant re-evaluation of U.S. policy towards Ukraine. Reports suggest that the Biden administration alongside President Donald Trump is considering shifting focus away from the stalled peace process. This shift is particularly concerning for Putin as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio hinted at a readiness to move on to other priorities if substantive progress remains elusive. Experts warn that this potential disengagement could embolden Russia as it seeks to consolidate its gains in Ukraine, exploiting perceived U.S. withdrawal to deliver a decisive blow against Ukrainian defenses. Russian state media has reacted to the U.S. stance with a mix of triumph and skepticism, portraying the prolonged conflict as a strategic victory for Russia that necessitates U.S. withdrawal from peace negotiations. However, this narrative fails to fully capture the growing unity among European nations in their commitment to supporting Ukraine. Despite Russia's attempts to undermine transatlantic alliances, European leaders are increasingly coordinating with the U.S. to bolster Ukraine's defenses and deter further aggression. Putin's diplomatic maneuvers extend beyond Ukraine as he seeks to re-establish ties with the U.S. on other fronts, notably in the Middle East. Recent meetings between the Trump administration and Iranian officials suggest that Russia is keen to position itself as a key player in regional diplomacy even as it grapples with the fallout of its actions in Ukraine. The Kremlin appears to be leveraging these relationships to divert attention from its military ambitions in Eastern Europe, hoping to create a narrative that distances itself from the ongoing conflict. As the situation evolves, the Kremlin finds itself in a precarious position. The intertwining of Putin's domestic stability with the continuation of the war raises questions about the sustainability of his regime. The longer he remains entrenched in this conflict, the more severe the repercussions may become for both himself and the Russian populace. The future of peace talks and the broader geopolitical landscape will likely hinge on the ability of Western allies to maintain a united front against Russian aggression alongside their commitment to a stable and just resolution to the ongoing conflict. In conclusion, as global leaders converge to discuss economic and political challenges, the implications of Putin's recent gestures and the evolving U.S. foreign policy underscore the intricate dynamics of power and diplomacy in the modern world. With the specter of continued conflict looming, the international community watches closely, anticipating the next moves in a high-stakes game of strategy that could reshape the geopolitical order for years to come. In a striking demonstration of ongoing tensions amid the ongoing war in Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of attempting to create a misleading image of a ceasefire while continuing its military operations. This assertion comes on the heels of Russian President Vladimir Putin's declaration of a temporary truce coinciding with Orthodox Easter, which was met with skepticism from Ukrainian officials. On April 21, 2025, Zelensky took to social media to express his concerns, stating, "As of Easter morning, we can say that the Russian army is trying to create a general impression of a ceasefire, but in some places it does not abandon individual attempts to advance and inflict losses on Ukraine." His remarks highlight the complexity and fragility of the ceasefire, which Putin announced would last for 30 hours from Saturday evening until midnight on Monday. Despite the proclaimed truce, Zelensky reported a stark reality on the ground, detailing 67 assaults by Russian forces on Ukrainian positions, including over 1,300 instances of shelling, with a significant portion involving heavy weaponry. The Ukrainian president also noted the use of drones in over 600 attacks, underscoring the stark contrast between Russia's public declarations and its military actions. In an effort to address the ongoing violence, Zelensky proposed an extension of the ceasefire for an additional 30 days, contingent upon Russia's compliance and cessation of strikes on civilian infrastructure. If Russia does not agree to such a step, it will be proof that it intends to continue doing only those things which destroy human lives and prolong the war, he stated emphatically. His proposal remains open as Ukrainian officials await a response from Moscow. Russia, for its part, has claimed that Ukrainian forces violated the ceasefire by launching drone attacks into Russian territory. The Russian Defense Ministry reported civilian casualties, although it did not provide specifics, and asserted that its troops adhered strictly to the truce. This blame-shifting underscores the ongoing propaganda battle being waged alongside the military conflict. As the situation unfolds, it remains clear that the specter of violence looms large over the region. Zelensky's remarks reflect a broader skepticism towards Russia's intentions, with the Ukrainian leader suggesting that Putin may lack control over his military or is merely engaging in public relations maneuvers rather than pursuing a genuine peace process. In practice, either Putin does not have full control over his army, or the situation proves that in Russia they have no intention of making a genuine move toward ending the war, he stated. Adding to the geopolitical complexity, U.S. President Donald Trump indicated that negotiations between Ukraine and Russia are nearing a critical juncture. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department reaffirmed its commitment to a comprehensive ceasefire, with ongoing discussions about peace prospects reportedly taking place in Paris. As international observers continue to monitor the situation, the coming days will be crucial in determining whether any meaningful progress can be made toward a lasting peace or if the cycle of violence will persist. The stakes remain high not only for Ukraine but for regional stability, as the world watches closely for signs of either escalation or a breakthrough in negotiations.